Joe King walks out on stage and says,
"Hello, yes, my name's Joe King. I'm not joking, though I prefer to be called Juris Dr. King. Today is July 4th, which marks America's 247th birthday."
Applause, applause, applause. King.
However, in a relatively recent NBC News poll, 71% of Americans thought America was heading in the wrong direction. And in fact, that was the 8th time in the last 9 NBC News surveys dating back to October 2021 when the wrong track has been above 70%. Despite bringing that up, however, I think America's going to be just fine. Look what we've been through. We celebrate today because 247 years ago we declared our independence from tyrannical rule and never looked back. And 234 years ago we adopted our Constitution, which among other things grants us freedom of speech. However, that only applies to the country itself, meaning our big tech companies like YouTube's parent company Alphabet doesn't have to allow free speech on its platform. I've had 2 of my episodes removed from YouTube, and I don't want to make it a third. 3 strikes and you're out, as they say, so I've been very toned down politically for about a year now. But count your blessings, as at least YouTube does allow me to interview dead people, so I can't complain too much. But I feel constrained a bit that I can't give a full accounting of what I feel like is going on in this country. But what I think I can say is we're heading towards a 2024 election where the 2 leading favorites don't seem very favored by the people, as they have very paltry approval ratings according to 538.com, with President Biden at 41% and Donald Trump at 31%. And boy, I wish I could say how I really feel about this situation, but 3 strikes and you're out on YouTube, so I can't cross their community guidelines here in this free country where freedom of speech is protected, provided you don't need to use a big tech platform and can afford to have your own platform. But you know what? One thing I've learned from my interviewing of all these dead people is that we're lucky to be alive. And the celebration we're having today, those people who made it possible are no longer with us. Jefferson, Adams, Washington, Franklin, Madison, Hamilton, Jay. Those people were brave enough to overthrow a system that wasn't working for them and create a whole new system that allows for someone like me to have hope that no matter what direction we're heading this very minute, that we have what it takes to turn it around and continue to make the United States of America the greatest country that has ever existed. Plus, have you seen those girls on Instagram and TikTok? How can you complain when there's thousands of tens all over the internet trying to compensate for their dad's lack of attention by showing themselves off in the sexiest ways possible? God bless America.
King walks off stage and onto another stage, sits in a seat behind a desk and says,
"Please welcome to the program, in honor of the 4th of July, the writer of the Declaration of Independence and the first ever host of Saturday Night Live, former President Thomas Jefferson."
Thomas Jefferson emerges from behind a curtain and waves at the audience. Applause, applause, applause. Jefferson walks over and sits in a seat next to King's desk. King.
"Welcome to the program, President Jefferson."
Jefferson. "I'm grateful to be here."
King. "So you were born to Peter and Jane Jefferson in 1743. Boy, that's a long time ago."
Jefferson. "Yes, it is."
King. "You must feel pretty old then, huh?"
Jefferson. "Well, there's spirits a lot older than me around, that's for sure."
King. "Now, President Jefferson, one thing I've noticed right off the bat here that's different from when you hosted my other program is that I can actually understand what you're saying."
Jefferson. "I've made a concerted effort to, quote, dumb down the breadth of my discourse in order to be more amenable to younger listeners."
King. "Okay, why don't you dumb it down just a smidge more there, okay? So anyway, your father died when you were 13?
Jefferson. "Yes, and my father's massive holdings of land was divided between me and my brother Randolph."
King. "Did your brother go by Randy at least?"
Jefferson. "No. Anyway, I inherited 5,000 acres of land, including Monticello, and I assumed full legal authority over the property when I turned 21.
King. "Very good. Now, at age 16, you enrolled at William and Mary, where you studied mathematics, metaphysics, and philosophy under William Small."
Jefferson. "Yes, under Professor Small's tutelage, I encountered the ideas of the empiricists, including John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Isaac Newton. which had an enormous influence on how I viewed the world. Professor Small also accepted me into his inner circle, where I became a regular member of their dinner parties, where I heard more common good sense and rational and philosophical conversations than in all the rest of my life.
King. Very good. Now you then became a lawyer. You know I'm also a lawyer.
Jefferson. Right, one who spends his time making jokes and interviewing deceased people?
King. I never said I was a good one, okay? Now, after becoming a lawyer, you got started into politics in 1769?
Jefferson. Yes, I was a delegate in the Virginia House of Burgesses from 1769 into 1775. I pursued reforms to slavery, including writing and sponsoring legislation in 1769 to strip power away from the royal governor and courts, which would instead provide masters of slaves with the discretion to emancipate them. But the reforms were never passed in heavily agrarian Virginia.
King. Now, as a lawyer, you also took 7 cases of freedom-seeking slaves and invoked natural law in doing so, arguing that everyone comes into the world with the right to his own person and using it at his own will. This is what is called personal liberty and is given him by the author of nature because it is necessary for his own sustenance.
Jefferson. Yes, I wasn't successful in those cases, but I did believe in their right to freedom.
King. That's even though you had slaves yourself.
Jefferson. Regrettably, yes.
King. Now, you were married in 1772 to Martha Skelton, your third cousin, whom was a skilled pianist, and you'd often accompany her by playing the violin or cello, and she bore you 6 children?
Jefferson. Yes, but unfortunately only 2, Martha and Mary, survived into adulthood, and my wife Martha later suffered from ill health, including diabetes, and died after a few months after her last childbirth in 1782 at only 36, with me by her bedside.
King. That's tragic. Now, however, the reason people are celebrating today, you wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Jefferson. Yes, at 33, I was one of the youngest delegates to the Second Continental Congress beginning in 1775 at the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War, where a formal Declaration of Independence from Britain was overwhelmingly favored. In writing the Declaration, I was inspired by the Enlightenment ideals of the sanctity of the individual and the writings of Locke and Montesquieu. I was part of the Committee of 5, along with John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman, charged by the Congress with writing a formal Declaration of Independence. I was chosen among the 5 to do the literal writing, and did so over a period of 17 days from June 11th to June 28th, 1776.
King. Shouldn't we get all 17 of those days off instead of just July 4th then?
Jefferson. Perhaps you should. Anyway, it was sent for ratification June 28th, and a quarter of my original draft was removed, including a portion that was critical of King George III and an anti-slavery clause, where I was critical of George for importing slaves to the colonies.
King. And now they remove your statues. Are you kidding me?
Jefferson. Anyway, yes, the revised version was ratified on July 4, 1776.
King. Very good. Now, in declaring your independence, you were committing high treason against the crown, which was deemed the most serious criminal offense and was punishable by torture and death, including hanging almost to the point of death, followed by emasculation, disembowelment, decapitation, and dismemberment chopped into 4 pieces, with the remains then often displayed in public to serve as a warning of the fate of traitors.
Jefferson. Yes, I was very aware that that was what we were facing if we were unsuccessful.
King. Holy moly, not even just the hanging, they have to include emasculation, disembowelment, decapitation, and dismemberment. Anyway, your preamble in the Declaration is regarded as an enduring statement on individual and human rights, and the phrase, all men are created equal, has been called one of the best-known sentences in the English language.
Jefferson. Yes, I am as proud of that document as I am of anything else in my life.
King. Very good. Now, after the Revolutionary War, you became a member of the Congress of the Confederation and were eventually appointed by that body to become America's minister to France.
Jefferson. That is correct. I brought my 2 daughters with me, and for the most part, I had a lovely time.
King. Including when you brought your slave, Sally Adams.
Jefferson. Yes.
King. And she bore you 6 more children, 4 of whom survived into adulthood.
Jefferson. Yes.
King. Okay, now after returning from Paris, you accepted President Washington's invitation to serve as the first ever Secretary of State.
Jefferson. Yes, the most pressing issue at the time was the national debt. I opposed the national debt, preferring that each state retire its own, in contrast to Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton, who desired consolidation of various states' debts by the federal government. Hamilton also had plans to establish the national credit and a national bank, but I strenuously opposed this and attempted to undermine his agenda, which nearly led Washington to dismissing me from his cabinet. I later left the cabinet voluntarily.
King, very good. How exciting. Anyway, you then ran for president in 1796, losing to John Adams, thus becoming vice president.
Jefferson. Yes, as presiding officer of the Senate, I assumed a more passive role than my predecessor John Adams had. I allowed the Senate to freely conduct debates and confined my participation to procedural issues, which was an honorable and easy role.
King. Very good. Now, after your honorable and easy role, you won the rematch with Adams in the election of 1800 and became the 3rd president of the United States.
Jefferson. That's correct. And while I'd love to talk to you at great length about my presidency, I have some other matters to attend to, and this is running a bit longer than I expected.
King, very good. I was about to cut you off myself because of the time issue, but thank you for being on the program. You're considered one of the greatest presidents of all time, especially with that Louisiana purchase of yours. But we especially wanted to thank you today and have you on to touch upon that remarkable document you wrote, the Declaration of Independence.
Jefferson, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
King, Thomas Jefferson, everybody.
Applause, applause, applause.
King. That's all the time we have for this show, but tune in the next one where we interview another deceased guest. Until then, I'm Joe.